Hello everybody, welcome to Reddit stories, but I read them myself. Today we have, what is the darkest thing you have ever done and don't regret? Got into a car accident and had to stay with my mom for a couple days to figure out what to do. Went back to my apartment, I had 2 roommates, and everything was missing from my room. Long story short, one of my roommates had everything hidden in her room. I called and told her the things were missing from my room, and she came up with the lie that a couple girls came to look in my room. I was moving out because of the accident, long story, and that they must have taken my things. She had everything I owned, including grandmother's perfume bottles stuffed to the back of her closet, under her bed, behind her dresser. So I packed all of my stuff up, then took a giant black garbage bag and stuffed as much as her closet in it as I could. Took it to the middle of nowhere, dug a hole, and burnt it. She called screaming at me that her stuff was missing, and I told her the 2 girls must have come by and taken her stuff too. That was a good one. I hit my uncle left, right, and center when he was trying to choke my father to death. I was 16 years old at the time, a very skinny girl. I beat his face, neck, and every part of him that I could target with so much intensity that my knuckles turned blue the next day. I had an animalistic rage that day, trying to help my father get away from his death grip. I hate my uncle even today. I got anger issues because of growing up around him, and I don't regret beating him that day at all. He was physically abusive to his wife as well. One fine day, his wife retaliated by beating him blue with a stick, and he stopped being physically violent towards her post that. My sister and I went to the same school. She was a year older. This guy was making her life hell, and she was crying a lot, which was, still is, really, really unlike her. After weeks of this, my mom told me to beat him up, and I would not be in trouble at home if I got in trouble at school for doing so. The next day I saw my opportunity when I was in class and watched him walking in the hallway go into the guy's bathroom. I immediately asked for permission to go too. I opened the door quietly and he was taking a piss at the urinal. I Sparta kicked his ass into the urinal and then just beat the shit out of him, pissing on himself and all. I told him to leave my sister alone or it'd happen again. My sister came home happy that day and never had another problem. She didn't know this happened for about 20 years, not a shred of regret. A neighbor like 10 years ago was neglecting their dog badly in the heat. The dog escaped often and ended up at the shelter a lot. One day she jumped the fence and got her tie-out cable stuck on the fence. She was not in danger of choking. Neighbor put her on a 3-foot-long cable tied to a doorknob with no water, a 90-degree day, and she let some kind folks steal her, watched the whole thing and said nothing to stop them, which is good, because that dog needs a new home. When I was 13, my very abusive and extremely drunken father was swinging at my dog, trying to punch him. I kicked the old bastard down a flight of stairs, breaking every rib on his left side, some twice and puncturing a lung. Then I went right back to watching Dukes of Hazzard. About 5 hours later, my mom came home. She asked where my dad was. I told her he was laying on the basement floor. Why? He's drunk, of course. He must have fell. She went down there and bitched him out for about 20 minutes, but he was mostly unconscious. Then she called my uncle to come and help me carry him upstairs. My dog wouldn't let my uncle anywhere near the old man despite their earlier altercation. So I had to carry him up by myself. I was a big kid. Anyone with even a tiny bit of first aid knowledge, me from Scouts, would know not to do that. I had to sling him in a blanket over my shoulder, Santa Claus style. He then spent the next 4 days getting sober enough, not sober, to go to the hospital. There he was properly diagnosed and treated and his lung drained and reinflated. While he was able to smoke, yep, smoke right there in the hospital bed, they did not provide alcohol on the hospital menu. So he went into withdrawal, delirium, tremors, and all. Kept screaming, "Get that goddamn horse off my bed. How did that horse get in here?" Used to, in his mind, drive the bed around his old neighborhood like a Packard motor car and describe the sights to people. That lasted about a week. Then, and I don't know how this works, the doctors refused to release him from the hospital and moved him to the psych ward. He spent 2 months or so in there being treated for addiction. During that time, no children, dogs, or wives were physically, mentally, or emotionally abused at our house. Not once, for the first time in about 30 years. Eventually he was discharged, and much to everyone's shock and utter disbelief, He never drank again, or beat his wife, or abused his children. His grandchildren absolutely worshipped him and competed for his favor. He was kind and generous and a great source of wisdom and humor for them. In time, they named their own sons after him and had his name tattooed on their flesh. Ultimately, he died of cancer, and when he did, I held him in my arms and looked him in the eyes so he wouldn't be scared or die alone. I was his primary caregiver for the last 7 years of his life, and I have zero regrets about my actions that day. Wow, that was deep. I bit the dick off the guy who forced it in my mouth. I don't even want to imagine what that looks like, but good for you. When my father was dying and in pain, I was the one who told the doctors he had been through enough and we couldn't see him suffer anymore. Doctor injected him with something, I assume a morphine megadose, and he passed peacefully moments after. Euthanasia may not be legal in the UK, but compassionate doctors know what's what. I don't regret it because my pa made me promise I would have his back when he got sick or old. I'm sad he got sick and never got to get old. Ghosted a guy who was supposed to be my friend. The friendship had started off fine. We became close very quickly, but then the cracks started yawning into weird black abysses. His stories didn't match up to reality. He always had a new story to tell and it was always fantastical. He would call me at 3 a.m. and just sob about how his bones hurt and he could see the shadow man. I was 19 and very confused, very afraid. I couldn't deal with it, and I didn't feel safe, and he never listened if I tried to help him through whatever was going on with him. So I just stopped picking up the phone, I stopped agreeing to meet him, I disappeared from his life. A year later, a mutual friend and an ex of mine told me he had died of bone cancer. Wow, I was fucking devastated. It traumatized me for years, thinking that he needed me and I ditched him and he died alone. It to this day crumbled how I navigate boundaries now. 5 years after that, I was told that it was all a lie and he had never had cancer, or he had it and was in a coma, or he moved away. I don't know the truth, but I do know that cutting those two liars out of my life was the right choice to make. Ex-stepfather had verbally and physically abused me for 12 years before I finally left the house for good. The last day I was there, my step piece of shit basically admitted to having feelings for me, choked me, and screamed at me for hours. I left through my bedroom window. For 5 months, I avoided that house until ex-stepfather got a hold of my new phone number and texted me nonstop about how I'm breaking my mom's heart by not coming to visit. So I texted back that I'll come by one day soon after work. When I got there, he opened the door and I cracked his face open with a baseball bat. The reason why the police weren't called was because my step-asshole was already wanted for trafficking substances. The pandemic started a couple months after and my mom decided to move out and let the piece of shit stay in my childhood home. Mom and I are in contact and she goes to therapy. I also go to therapy. 5 years ago, my dad suffered a catastrophic stroke, left paralyzed and robbed of his speech and ability to communicate. He was a shell of the once vibrant, charismatic man he once was. He was moved into skilled nursing where he lived for nearly 2 years. He was miserable. On my last visit, I told him it was okay if he wanted to leave us, that we would miss him, but he should go. A week later, I received the call that he had passed. Instead of immediate grief, I felt relief. Relief that he was finally free. The grief came later and I still miss him every single day. All right, everybody, that's it for tonight. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.